The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was folding laundry. I glanced at the screen and saw my father's name. My chest tightened slightly. We hadn't spoken much in recent years. Not out of a dramatic fight, but because every conversation left me feeling smaller, like I didn't belong in his version of the family. I hesitated before picking it up, my fingers lingering over the receiver. "Hi, Dad," I said cautiously. "Livia." His voice sounded unusually bright. "How are you, sweetheart?" I straightened, a small warning bell ringing in my mind. My father rarely called unless he needed something, and his tone now carried an almost too cheerful edge. "I'm fine." "What's going on?" "Well, I wanted to talk to you about something important. Emilia's birthday is coming up. She'll be 30. We're planning a party at the old estate. It would mean a lot if you could come." I paused, trying to gauge his intent. My sister Vanessa would be there, of course. The last time I had seen her, our interactions had been polite but strained, a constant competition I never seemed to win. Still, Emilia's birthday felt different. She had always been kind to me, and I knew missing this occasion would hurt more than any lingering tension with Vanessa. "Of course," I said softly. "I'd be happy to come." "Wonderful," he said warmly. "It'll mean the world to her. Big gathering, cake, decorations, the whole works." I ended the call and set the phone down, feeling a mix of anticipation and unease. Aaron, who had been reading quietly in the living room, looked up at me and raised an eyebrow. I shook my head slightly, unsure how to explain the knot forming in my stomach. The week leading up to the party stretched uneasily, every day filled with subtle dread beneath the ordinary planning. The drive there promised more than just a visit. It promised answers I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The sun had begun its descent when Aaron and I finally pulled into the long driveway of the old estate. The familiar white shutters gleamed under the warm evening light, and the lawn was meticulously trimmed, as if it had been prepared for a magazine shoot. Balloons floated lightly above the walkway, and a banner announcing Emilia's birthday hung perfectly between two maple trees. On the surface, everything looked ideal. As we stepped out of the car, I noticed a cluster of guests near the front entrance. Most faces were familiar, but a few were strangers. People who lingered on the edges, not mingling or laughing, just observing. Something about the way they held themselves made my skin prick. I exchanged a glance with Aaron, whose jaw was tight, eyes scanning every corner. He gave me a faint shake of his head, a signal we had long used when he wanted to communicate without drawing attention. I tried to smile and wave at my father, but the gesture felt hollow. His cheerfulness seemed practiced, too bright for a casual family gathering. Vanessa appeared beside him, offering me an exaggerated hug that lingered a moment too long. I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned the crowd as if ensuring everything unfolded according to some invisible plan. Aaron's hand brushed mine lightly, a reminder to stay alert, to trust the instincts I couldn't yet name. The laughter of other guests floated over us, the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation creating a backdrop that felt almost surreal. Every detail, the carefully arranged tables, the spotless walkways, even the timing of Emilia's arrival hinted at a precision that was unnerving. As we moved through the crowd, I couldn't shake the sense that we were stepping into a scene designed not for celebration, but for observation. I forced a polite smile when someone commented on our attire and nodded as if nothing felt off, but my stomach knotted with unease. Aaron leaned in just enough for me to hear, whispering a single word, "Watch." I nodded subtly, and together we continued toward the main entrance. Each step waited with anticipation for what we might discover inside. We had barely stepped into the estate when Aaron leaned close, his voice low and urgent. "Get your bag." "We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." I froze for a moment, unsure if I had heard him correctly. My first instinct was disbelief. This was Amelia's birthday, a simple family gathering. Nothing more. Yet the firmness in his tone, the tight set of his jaw, and the intensity in his eyes left no room for doubt. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the ordinary with the warning that seemed entirely out of place. I forced myself to nod subtly, careful to maintain a casual expression as we moved deeper into the room. The laughter and chatter of other guests filled the air, each cheerful note a jarring contrast to the sudden knot of tension coiling in my stomach. I offered a polite smile to a cousin who approached with a congratulatory hug, my pulse hammering beneath the practiced calm. Aaron's hand brushed mine briefly, a silent reinforcement of his warning. I followed his lead, matching his casual movements, pretending to examine the room with interest. Yet every detail, the perfectly polished tables, the deliberate arrangement of chairs, the way my sister Vanessa glided from guest to guest felt staged. My intuition prickled with unease, a quiet alarm I couldn't ignore. I tried to steady my breathing, to focus on the superficial appearances, but my gaze kept returning to Aaron. He was scanning the room, eyes flicking over each person, each corner, each potential anomaly. The warning he had given was now a living presence between us, demanding careful attention and immediate trust. I adjusted my stance, clutched my purse a little tighter, and followed him toward a quieter corner near the back. Every polite nod, every courteous laugh I offered felt like a performance, a shield between the world and the suspicion now gnawing at me. Aaron's whisper had broken the surface calm, and there was no returning to ordinary. The next steps we took would carry the weight of that warning. As we moved toward the back of the room, my eyes caught a glint of something tucked along the edge of the mantel. A thin wire, almost invisible against the polished wood, ran toward the corner where a speaker sat. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was part of the sound system, but the angle seemed deliberate, too precise. Aaron followed my gaze and nodded ever so slightly, his hand brushing mine in that familiar, silent reassurance. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. Every movement in the room seemed amplified now. Vanessa circulated among the guests with that practiced smile, gesturing just so as she steered conversations, subtly nudging certain people toward specific positions. My father lingered near the buffet, but his eyes constantly scanned the crowd. A faint twitch of calculation in his jawline. Something beneath the surface was orchestrated. I adjusted my stance, trying to appear casual while observing the unusual patterns. The strangers I had noticed earlier weren't mingling. They lingered near corners and doorways, speaking in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward us with unreadable expressions. The precision of their positions was unsettling, the way they blended into the background, but never truly disappeared from my awareness. Aaron and I exchanged another subtle signal, the kind we had always used when we needed to convey urgency without words. I could feel the tension in his fingers as he brushed mine, a silent reminder to remain calm but vigilant. Each forced smile and polite nod I offered felt heavier now, a mask against the unease curling through me. The carefully curated laughter, the timed clinks of glasses, and the orchestrated movement of guests made my intuition scream that this was no ordinary party. My chest tightened with the knowledge that the surface calm hid intent, and every detail was a signal we couldn't ignore. I leaned slightly closer to Aaron, whispering under my breath that we needed to be ready, and he gave the faintest nod. The pieces were starting to come together, and what we would discover next would demand our full attention. As Aaron guided me toward a quieter corner, my mind drifted back to earlier years at this same estate. I remembered the creak of the front porch boards beneath my small feet, the way sunlight slanted through the tall windows in the morning, and the faint scent of my grandmother's perfume lingering in the hall. Those were simpler times, filled with stories whispered over breakfast and summers spent in the garden. But even then, tension had always lurked beneath the surface. My relationship with my father had always been complicated. He carried a quiet expectation that I rarely measured up, and every interaction left a subtle weight pressing against my chest. Vanessa had been a constant rival, whether in school or at family gatherings, her smiles often masking a competitiveness I could never quite counter. And Amelia. We had never been close, though I had tried to bridge the gap, only to find polite acknowledgement in return. The distance between us felt magnified now, the past echoing in every carefully orchestrated detail around us. I shook my head slightly, trying to ground myself in the present. But the memories only sharpened my unease. Every detail at this party, the polished tables, the precise positioning of guests, the subtle signals I had already noticed felt like an extension of the old dynamics, twisted into something more deliberate and threatening. Aaron noticed my pause and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. He understood without words that the weight of family history made this situation all the more dangerous. My intuition told me that what had always been simmering beneath polite smiles and formal gestures was now manifesting in real, tangible threats. I let the memory settle and focused on the present, aware that understanding the past was essential to navigating the danger ahead. The next steps we would take demanded clarity, and every instinct told me we had to act carefully. Aaron guided me toward the side hallway, away from the crowd, his hand lightly brushing mine. My pulse raced, every step weighed with anticipation. He stopped near the kitchen doorway and nodded toward the drawers. I glanced down and noticed a small, unmarked bottle tucked behind the silverware. The cap was crushed, residue on the inside. My stomach twisted. "What is this?" I whispered. "Sedatives," Aaron replied quietly, his voice steady but tense. "They've been keeping her under just enough influence to control the situation." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Grandma takes medication, but this isn't hers," I said, tracing the labels in my head. The dosage was stronger, meant to sedate rather than treat. My hands trembled slightly as I processed what I was seeing. Aaron motioned toward the corner, where a tangle of thin wires snaked along the baseboards. Small cameras, almost invisible, pointed into the living room. "Surveillance," he said softly. "They want to document everything without anyone noticing." I crouched to get a better look, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. The strangers I had noticed earlier were not just bystanders they were watching, ready to intervene if we acted prematurely. I realized with a sinking feeling that this party was not a celebration. It was a setup. My father and Vanessa had orchestrated every detail, controlling the scene to manipulate Amelia's property and influence. Aaron handed me a flash drive he had slipped from his jacket pocket. "Photos, documents, everything we can safely collect," he said. I plugged it into my phone and scrolled through grainy images of the wires, the sedatives, and paperwork with signatures that were clearly forged. There were forms declaring Amelia mentally unfit, documents that could give them complete control over her finances and estate. My heart pounded. The ordinary party facade was gone, replaced by a tangible, immediate threat. We had proof, but acting on it meant confronting them, and any misstep could put Amelia in real danger. I looked at Aaron, meeting his calm, sharp gaze, and nodded. There was no time to hesitate. We had to leave and get help before it was too late. We moved toward the side exit, taking care not to draw attention. My hands were shaking slightly as I held the flash drive and my phone scanning the images we had just collected. Aaron's presence beside me was a quiet anchor, his eyes flicking to every corner, every figure that lingered in the shadows. The backyard seemed innocuous at first, guests chatting, children running, but the strangers we had noticed earlier were still there, positioned near the fences, their movements deliberate and controlled. I kept my steps slow, measured, mimicking casual movement. But every fiber of my body screamed urgency. Aaron whispered, "Stay calm. Keep it natural." I nodded, forcing my expression into a neutral smile as we passed a group near the patio. My throat felt tight, and I had to swallow several times to keep my voice from trembling. We reached the driveway, the car parked exactly where we had left it, and I felt a fleeting sense of relief. But the distant figures still caught my eye, lingering at the edges, watching. I slid into the passenger seat, while Aaron circled to the driver's side, opening the door with the same care as before. As soon as I was inside, Aaron locked the doors. The click sounded louder than I expected, a sharp punctuation that confirmed the gravity of the situation. He started the engine slowly, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. My pulse was loud in my ears, my mind racing through every possible contingency. I glanced down at the flash drive again, then at Aaron. "Do we have everything?" I asked softly. He gave me a brief nod. "Everything we need. Now we move before anyone notices we're gone." I exhaled, trying to steady my shaking hands. The evidence was in our possession, but the danger wasn't over. Every second counted as we prepared to leave the estate and take the first step toward getting help. Once we were a safe distance from the estate, Aaron pulled the car onto a quiet side street and stopped. I clutched the flash drive in my hand, my fingers trembling as I dialed the local police department. The line rang twice before a calm voice answered. "This is the county sheriff's department. What's your emergency?" I took a steadying breath. "We need to report suspected elder abuse and fraud," I said. "We have evidence, and the situation is urgent." Aaron leaned close, whispering details as I relayed the information. We described the hidden sedatives, forged documents, and surveillance equipment we had discovered. The officer asked clarifying questions, and we provided names, addresses, and a summary of the evidence. While I spoke, I kept glancing at Aaron. He remained composed, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror, alert to any sign that someone might be following us. The tension was palpable. The reality of what we had uncovered pressed down on both of us. The dispatcher instructed us to pull over if possible and wait for officers to arrive. I nodded, my stomach tight with anticipation, and Aaron guided the car into a small, partially concealed parking lot. I held the flash drive and phone close, ensuring that nothing could be lost or compromised. We sat in silence, the quiet between us heavy with unease and urgency. Every passing minute reminded me that we were racing against time, that the people we had just escaped from were still capable of acting. Aaron placed a reassuring hand over mine, a silent promise that we were doing everything we could to prevent further harm. We waited, eyes fixed on the road, listening for the first sign of the police vehicles approaching. The flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the driveway as we approached the estate again. This time with officers in tow. My stomach was tight, a mixture of dread and anticipation. Aaron parked carefully, and we stepped out, moving toward the front door with the flash drive and photos in hand. The officers knocked firmly, and Vanessa opened the door first, her smile still perfectly in place, but faltering slightly when she saw the uniformed men behind us. "Officers, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice wavering. Aaron stepped forward, calm but firm. "We're here following a report of suspected elder abuse and fraud. We have evidence." My father appeared behind her, eyes narrowing as he noticed the officers. "What is this about?" he asked, his tone strained. I could see the subtle panic rising in both of them, a contrast to the composed facades they had worn all evening. I handed one of the officers the flash drive while Aaron held the photos and paperwork for reference. The officer quickly scanned the evidence wires and hidden cameras, the unmarked sedatives, and documents with forged signatures declaring Grandma mentally unfit. Grandma, sitting in her favorite armchair, blinked up at the scene calmly. When asked if she understood what was happening and could make her own decisions, she responded clearly, her voice steady. Her mental competence was undeniable, and the officers immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. The tension in the room shifted. Vanessa's posture stiffened. My father's face paled, and the weight of their scheme became fully apparent. The officers instructed them to remain inside while they began documenting the evidence and preparing to take statements. Aaron placed a hand on my back briefly, a silent reassurance as we watched the legal machinery start to move. The perpetrators could no longer hide behind polite smiles and orchestrated appearances. Every carefully planned detail of their scheme had been exposed, and the law was now intervening. We remained near Grandma, ensuring she understood and felt supported, as the officers confirmed that steps would be taken to secure her safety and estate. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the full implications of what had been uncovered were only just beginning. The officers instructed us to remain available for follow-up while they prepared to escort Grandma safely, and we knew the next steps would solidify both justice and protection. Grandma was safely settled into a private room at the hospital, her favorite shawl draped over her shoulders. I held her hand, feeling the steadiness of her grip, as if she were reminding me that we had done the right thing. Aaron sat beside me, quiet but attentive, his presence a calm reassurance after the storm of tension and fear. The officers had left detailed instructions for her care, and the paperwork to prevent any further interference from my father or sister was already in motion. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, tempered by the weight of what could have happened if we had hesitated or ignored the warning signs. Sitting there, I reflected on the past weeks, the hidden signals, the subtle manipulations, the careful orchestration of a party that was anything but innocent. Courage had been required, but so had vigilance, attention to detail, and trust in instinct. Family dynamics were complicated, and appearances could no longer be taken at face value. Aaron reached over and squeezed my hand. "We did what we had to do," he said softly. I nodded, understanding that justice and protection often came at the cost of discomfort and confrontation. As I looked out the hospital window at the fading Connecticut light, I realized that ordinary celebrations could mask extraordinary danger, and that proactive awareness could make the difference between harm and safety. The lessons of vigilance and action were ones I would carry with me from that day forward.